So I've been getting a lot of DMs and emails asking me about my new book, Home. When is it coming out? Okay, no one's been asking. I don't know if anyone cares. I don't think anyone who ever says that they get a lot of DMs and emails is actually ever getting any DMs and emails. Regardless, I was up late night working on it. I've started. That's exciting for me, so I'm going to read a little bit for you. July 16th, 2020, 10:50 p.m. I've done it. I've created a new Word document and I've saved it as Home, the title of my upcoming book. And I've written the date. It's an accomplishment because I know the sheer power of starting. I know fuck all about physics, other than my parents prohibited me from being on hotel balconies unsupervised because of my experiment series, finding out what floats. And I sat next to Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson randomly at the zoo. But I'll say this with my serious face on. Objects in motion stay in motion. Thanks, Newton. After starting living in Korea in the same way, it wasn't long until I was looking at a completed manuscript. So that date, that's my water breaking. And this introduction here will get me a head poking out. From there, it's just a case of deep breathing, grunting, and pushing. Maybe a few flexes in the mirror too. Giving birth is just like working out, right? Sorry, really struggling to stay in my lane here. I know birthing a baby is no walk in the park, and writing my first book only came about so easily because I had the luxury of living on a tiny tropical island. Not an actual luxury. I was on a volunteer assignment, but life in Tonga was generously showering me with spare time and space. Space, both psychologically and physically. I had the distance to reflect on the period of my life that Living in Cream covered. Home was initially meant to cover 2014 to 2017. Yes, Morty, I'm aware it's 2020. But every time I intended to start writing in 2017, the close of a chapter would see another shortly start. Home is meant to be about my journey back to myself, a place of deeper understanding. So it didn't make sense to start writing until I'd arrived, until I was safe and content, until I could feel the satisfaction of walking through the door, kicking off my shoes, and letting out a deep sigh, followed by a sneaky fart. At this moment, July 16, 2020, at now 11:39 p.m, shit is fucking shook. There's something silent and deadly in the air, and it didn't come from my butt. I'm far from content or safe. I'm stuck at home, but not in the sense of this book's title. I'm stranded, but not in a tiny tropical island kind of way. I'm floating out in the uncertain sea. See what I did there? I hope you got it, because Grammarly doesn't. Grammarly hasn't read Living in Korean, but hopefully you have. And you know I pump my books full of puns like a chicken farmer does with hormones. But back to it. I'm scared, I'm scrambling for some sort of stability. Which is why I've decided to start writing. My sister in Seoul, Candice, recently shared with me that writing her book and working on her astrology business, The Divine Unearthing, #sponsored post, has been her saving grace from going, in her words,
stark raving mad.
During this lockdown. So I'm going to go for it like a runaway from a rosy can. I'm setting off in the middle of the night with a box of muesli bars and no idea of where I'll end up. I know enough to start though, and like I said, that's powerful. Over the last 6 years, I said goodbye to the life I grew up with, and I spent 1 year living in a country and culture I had never experienced. I learned about myself and life. I wrote a book. I came back, not knowing where I fit in. Then I moved across state borders to Sydney, where I knew one person. I started a new life for myself, but really struggled. I found myself living in a shoebox room with no view, and a guy that would leave prawns on the table. Like, use a fucking coaster, mate. He also kicked me out. I found myself with some unhealthy coping habits, but I didn't want to quit. I pushed on, only to be made redundant after a year. Then I packed up my life into my car once again, and I drove further south to Melbourne. This time I took everything I learnt, and I thrived. That spark in my eyes, that bit of my soul that Sydney stole, it came back. I found my best friend, I found more friends, I went vegan, I did my first solo travel through India successfully. I didn't even get diarrhea, although I did get chased by a monkey outside the Taj Mahal. I got back into peak fitness shape. I got laid after almost 3 years of feeling so uncomfortable in my own skin. And I also got a girlfriend after 10 years officially single. I became the mascot for an Aussie Tool tribute band. I met someone for 10 minutes at a conference. Then the next time I saw her, we were traveling through the heart of Australia in a van. I got to see Uluru under the moonlight and stars. It was beautiful. I professionally printed my book. I sold copies online. I got it on shelves at a local bookstore right next to the subtle art of not giving a fuck. And that I did give plenty of fucks about. I did stand-up comedy. I reached out to an ex of 7 years who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, and I got closure. I did some big stuff. But something else big happened here. Despite all this, my confidence got cracked by just one incident. I lost the job that I moved here for. I had an upper manager tell me that I can't write. Ouch. But this time it was more on me. I was diagnosed with ADHD and possibly bipolar 2. And that's something very hard to swallow at 30. I struggled, but then in the nick of time, right before I was going to consider moving back to Brisbane, I got thrown a lifeline by someone who worked for a company that they were actually leaving that week. And there I worked part-time for 2 years while I started speaking in high schools about my unhealthy relationship with exercise and masculinity. This is all while I worked at accepting my disorders and figuring out how I could leverage them into strengths. And the result was a decision to change careers and pursue counselling. And that's where things are at now. I'm still studying, but I've started my placement in a school. And I've been made redundant like a lot of other people, thanks COVID. And I'm also finding myself falling between lulls of hopelessness and stagnation. Like it did for Candace, I'm hoping writing keeps me going, especially as I recap over all the circumstances I've climbed and conquered, including reaching heights of 5,000 meters above sea level in the Himalayas, which are featured on this book's cover. And I'm hoping what I write helps you too, wherever you are at in your journey. I mean, I'm not just going to talk about myself here. I want to go viral, but not bad dates in Melbourne viral. And this time, the clothes are staying on. Less skin and more substance is what I promised when I first put out my intentions to start writing home in December 2017. So let's start and see where this ends up. 12:41 p.m. Plink! We have a head. And it's definitely looking cuter than me as a baby. Again, if you've read Living in Cream, you know. Check it out, it's a free download on boyunderthebridge.com. Apart from that, stay tuned, follow along, because Dorothy, we're heading home.